Hey there everyone, I'm Jeff, this is Tabletop Toolbox, and you have tuned in to episode 9 of the Weekly Ratchet, the final single-digit episode. In this episode, I'm going to talk about some really small games and some other stuff here on the Weekly Ratchet. That's right, everybody. Welcome to the Weekly Ratchet, episode 9, the final single-digit episode. No, don't want to scare you. I'm not canceling this series anytime soon. I've been having fun doing this, and I hope you've been having fun watching it. Now, a few things at the top of the show. I'm trying a different lighting setup here, going with a different sort of overhead light. I got big light. I mean, you can see how hot it makes my hand. I'm hoping this is going to look good. I really don't know. I've got a monitor here that I kind of keep looking at, and I really need to stop doing that. But we'll see how this comes out. I can tell that there's some extra clarity in my face, and I'm just going to apologize for that right now. One other thing, too, is that I've noticed editing these that they're just getting too long. So I am going to try, and I'm already off to a bad start here, to streamline these shows a little bit. So let's get to some new games. First of all, I went to Barnes & Noble this week. My good friend Daniel, who I've mentioned here a couple of times, I need to get him on the show. He's moving. He's moving here in town, thankfully, not leaving us, but they're downsizing their house. So I went to get him kind of a housewarming gag gift, and I got him a couple of these. These are called Paco games. They're from Chris Handy. He's got like 24 of these different things. They're just little card games, and I was able to get him 2 of these. I got him Dig, which is a cute little game about dogs trying to dig for bones, and Rum, which is kind of a push your luck game where you're trying to collect treasure and rum as a pirate. I wanted to get him Bus, which is probably my favorite of all of them so far. You kind of make a little city map, and you're driving around a city bus trying to pick up and deliver passengers. A cute little game. I don't really recommend these. They're not like fantastic games, but you can play these things on a bar top. They're so small. And of course, I brought them to him in a big bag, and I told him, I bought you some new games, and his wife was kind of glaring at me, and then he opened it and saw those, and everyone was laughing. So that was a lot of fun. While I was there, however, at Barnes & Noble, I found this game. This is called Outer Space, the Galaxy Building Card Game. Now, at first I read it as a deck building card game, which it is not. And I'm going to talk about this here in a little bit because I've already played it. I also picked up a couple Lorcana cards. I'm still trying to collect some of the Rise of the Floodborn cards. And while I was also there, I bought Lacuna. That's right, Hakuna, Matata, Lacuna, Lorcana. And this is a game that was featured on a really entertaining Shut Up and Sit Down video a while back. And I'm going to talk about this one in a little bit because I've also already played it. And let's see, I also got in this, Greg Bowerly, Meeple Society. This has got your name written all over it, buddy. This is the Oblivion expansion to Eminent Domain. I paid way too much money to get this, but this was the last expansion that I needed. Of course, TMG is out of business, and I've been looking for this for a long time. I missed an opportunity to get it at Gen Con, and so now I have it. This came from Noble Knight, which is a really reputable but very expensive used game online store and eBay presence. The last one I'm going to talk about is this one. This is Epoch's Course of Cultures. And I forgot something. Hang on one second. Okay, sorry about that. I forgot to get something off the shelf, and I was not about to re-record all of this for a fifth time. So this is by Jeffrey CCH is the designer, and the publisher behind this is called Ice Makes. I ran into them at Gen Con last year, and I'm somewhat familiar with them because here are a couple other of Jeffrey CCH's, and I don't know what that stands for. It's an odd name, but this is 2 other of his games also from Ice Make. So you have Age of Civilization and Age of Galaxy. I have not played Age of Galaxy yet, and I really have no good excuse. Age of Civilization is a neat little abstract civilization, sort of an engine building tech tree kind of a game. It's a pretty neat game. You can also play this out on Board Game Arena if you're so inclined. Excuse me. Obviously, this is a very, very different size, different complexity, different everything game from the same designer and same publisher. Now, this is a prototype copy that they sent me through conversations I've had with them since Gen Con. I've got a point of contact there at Ice Makes. I'm curious about this. It does look to be fairly abstracted. I took a quick look through the rule book. some interesting stuff going on here, and I don't know how it's going to play out, but I'm certainly going to check it out. So yeah, I'm curious about this one. That is it for, oh man, that's heavy. For new games here at the Treehouse, what have you collected this week? Let's move on. All right, let's check out some crowdfunding projects this week. Again, I've been kind of trying to stay back a little bit on the crowdfunding stuff. It's not working super great, but I'm trying. I do have a couple projects here to check out, so let's get to it. Up first, I have Mars Expedition Sol 43, a 1 to 2 player logic game. Now, I checked this out kind of real quick. It's not really clear exactly to me what this is. It's not a cooperative game. It's a puzzle game that it says you can play. It says somewhere down here that you can play by yourself or in pairs. I don't know how you could play it only as a pair if it's a single player game. Basically, obviously a logic puzzle, you can only move in certain directions. You're trying to kind of get around this board. I also found very odd this 5 to 120 minute game each day. It seems like you can kind of play as many days as you want, but I think each day is its own game, right? Each day is its own logic puzzle. I like the art. I really like the presentation. I'm not a huge fan of these logic puzzle games. I love these 3D pieces. Some dust storms, and looks like you've got little spaceships or something. You've got, obviously restrictions of where you can move. This one animation, I think, kind of gave you a little bit of an idea as to what it does. First, let me look at this. Brainstorm and fun, brain exercises, family game. So there you go, 1 to 2 players, a logic game that has possibility to play alone or in pairs, unlimited playtime. Sure, cute. Okay, and so here, yeah, you see some of this kind of motion as to, you have to move in certain directions, I guess. You probably get some instructions on how you have to move in a certain way, maybe at that certain time, and then, of course, trying to get things done. Looks cute. Not something I would normally jump on. Up next, I have 13 Moons, a celestial adventure. Now, this one caught my attention. I really like this card art on these cards. That's neat, sort of this almost looks like watercolor, pastels with the moon. But from the looks of it, all it really is a rummy game. It says here, it's a rummy-style card game that wants you to be friends with the moon. It builds a real-time connection with the moon through play. Well, the way that it builds a real-time connection through the moon, as it explains down here somewhere, is that, it was actually right here. Luminary cards, constantly changing bonus cards, which corresponds to the current phase of the moon. For example, if the moon is in waxing crescent phase on the day that you're playing, then that card is worth extra points. That kind of means there's like this added homework element before you play this. Okay, well, what phase of the moon are you in? Okay, so the 8 card's going to be worth more. I don't know. I mean, I guess that's kind of a neat idea. Again, I like the look of the cards. That one right there, that kind of rainbow burst is really neat looking. But I feel like rummy is rummy, right? And it's just, they're just trying to make a little twist on it based on changing the value of cards based on the day. Yeah, I'm not sure about it, but it looks really cool. Up next is Crowdfunding. I've never been 1,000% sure how to say this, but I know that it is sort of a German theme, right? Although what's interesting is I believe in this new version of Crowdfunding, you have American car makers. So I know that the Dodge brothers are in here. I believe I saw Walter P. Chrysler. How much time is left on this anyways? 5 days. I have the original Crowdfunding, and I really do like it, although it does have one of those systems where, and Glenmore is also a game like this, where you take an action by moving forward on this wheel, and then whoever is furthest back on the wheel gets to go again. So, of course, if one player leaps forward to grab some really good action, then other players may get to take multiple turns before that first player can go again. And I'm just not crazy about these because I feel like it really forces you to either skip what you think is a good action and just not take it because you probably won't get a chance to take it because there aren't that many options. And so if you skip 3 or 4 actions to take something, then you're going to watch someone sit there and probably jump ahead of you by doing a whole bunch of what may seem like smaller actions, but maybe they're not optimized for you at that time. Anyways, I like the game. I've described it as kind of a light version of Food Chain Magnate, because you can sort of influence the wants of your customers, and you can also do some, I don't want to say shady, but you can do some very clever marketing to sort of undercut your competitors, your opponents, and sell cars to folks, at maybe discounted prices. There's a lot going on in it, and it's a neat game, but it's not nearly as heavy as, say, Food Chain Magnate. It also reminds me, I just had it on the tip of my tongue, of a Smartphone. Smartphone Inc. It kind of has a lot of that same DNA to it, right? Of just trying to make the stuff that people want and then sell it to them before other folks can sell it to them, using that, I don't think it's called a rondelle. I can never remember. I believe Tom Vassell calls it the Ratchet system, where you can go forward, but you can't go back. Anyways, Crowdfunding it's a neat game. I love this idea of having, some American car makers. I am a big car fan. I've got some old cars. I got a car that doesn't look too far from this one on the cover, downstairs underneath my feet. But I don't know that it's worth having another copy of this. I've got the V6 edition, which was kind of like the second version of the original game, and I just don't know that it's worth spending the money on it. I do love the way it looks. The original game had a lot of just blue and white. It was a very sort of basic, drab-looking game because it was set, in that older era, as this is, but it still has that modern look to it. So, I'm not sure. I like it, and I'm really tempted by it. I just don't know that I need to spend the money on it because we haven't played Crowdfunding itself in a while. But definitely a good game. And if you're on the fence, if you like those kind of, clever economy games, clever marketing games, I would highly recommend Crowdfunding, Age of Engineering. The next one that I picked is Acornism. Let me get back up to the top here. This one just caught my attention because look at that. That looks neat. I love the simplicity of the colors, which is funny because I just got done talking about Crowdfunding having simple colors. But this is like a cute little abstract game where you're playing out animals and then trying to get the requisite number of acorns around them. It uses dominoes as your sort of your play system, and then you're putting down these scoring wooden tokens. There's a nice picture here that kind of shows you, I think, what the overall idea of it is, and it looks really cute, and I'm assuming it's a relatively small play area. I'm assuming it's a relatively small box. I also love the fact that you can get your copy for 28,000 yen. Or about $19 here US. I love that. I love going to my wife and saying, honey, I bought a game for 28,000 yen. But this actually kind of looks cute, and I'm tempted by this one because I think this could be another good pub game, which I will be talking about here in just a little bit. This is Acornism. Oh, it even has little bags. How cute. It's a cute game. It's cute. Last one I've got here for today is Cosmic Empires. I got flooded with emails this morning, actually, that this game launched on Kickstarter. I must have done like a follow ahead of time. I'm not sure. And so I was reading through this description. First of all, that fish thing is like weird, right? That's weird. I don't get the idea behind the flying rocket fish. Not sure. But it's obviously a card game where you're, sort of building your, galaxy or your culture or whatever. Apparently this is also on Board Game Arena with fairly good feedback. In fact, I found it kind of interesting. I have to give them some props on this. They made a comment here. It may have been in my email. Sorry, I don't see this here. And I don't want to pull up my email, obviously. No, that's not it. Anyways, they were saying in one of the emails, I guess, was that, the game's been really popular, but people are saying that it kind of fizzes out, that, it's just a gateway game, and, they wish it had more to it. And so in this reprint / expansion, they're adding a whole bunch of new cards, a whole bunch more content, and trying to make it a more substantial game, I guess. unfortunately for me, the moment that I saw that, okay, you're playing cards, then you roll your dice, and the dice dictate which cards can produce, and that just turns me off right there. I kind of hate having, a tableau of stuff that then I don't get to fire the way that I want to fire it because I got to rely on dice. Reminds me of Space Base, and I hate Space Base. I don't know why that game is so popular. But anyways, this is Cosmos Empires. Maybe if I ever get a chance, I'll check this out on Board Game Arena, but I do not plan on backing this one. I just think that dice games need to be dice games. They need to stay out of other games that can be a lot better without dice. That's my personal opinion, and those are the crowdfunding projects I took a look at this week. What are you checking out, and what are you hoping to get delivered soon? Let me know in the comments, and let's move on. All right, let's kick off the question of the week. Last week, I asked you what was your favorite mechanism in a board game, and I asked you to give me an example of one such game that might be sort of top of your list, and got some really great responses. Thank you so much for the feedback, for the participation. I love reading these comments, and I'm going to kick things off with CR Poll, who said that path-building games were his favorite, but then mentioned a bunch of what I would call tile-laying games like Carcassonne, Agropolis, which I wonder if he meant Acropolis. Also mentioned Ticket to Ride, which is a path-building game for sure, and Land vs. Sea. And I've always been kind of curious about Land vs. Sea. I keep seeing that at Barnes & Noble, actually, funny to mention. And I see it, looks kind of neat. I don't really know anything about it, and I've always been hesitant to, pull the trigger on another game that I might only play one or two times. So let me know a little bit more about that game if you don't mind. And then I thought this was funny. CR Poll went on to mention that he doesn't like brass, though, because he likes randomness in his games, and then asked if he's still allowed to watch these videos. That was pretty funny. I appreciated that. And it's funny that you say that because I think brass is very random. I think it's very random in which cards you get, and then you're trying to work with these cards to see what you can build in what is a fairly heavy game. And so I don't like this game because of the randomness of it. I don't know why this is number one on the list. It's also just incredibly boring to me. So stick around, you're fine. Anyways, as I mentioned, I'm curious if you meant Agropolis or Acropolis in your list. Agropolis is a little sort of it is a card laying game, sort of a tile laying game. This is by Button Shy, and it was sort of a sequel to Sprawlopolis, and then there was Combinopolis, which were supposed to let you put the two together. And these are solo games. Maybe you don't know about them. So if those are the kind of games that you like, Acropolis, Carcassonne, then you would probably like Sprawlopolis and Agropolis because they are solo games, just sort of puzzle games, very simple to play. But yeah, other than that, you're good. You can stick around. Cartoonist also said that he loves tile placement games, also mentioned Carcassonne, mentioned Forbidden Desert, and some other dungeon crawlers, but said that he has a limited budget, and I totally get it. And if you're interested in those sort of tile placement games, then stick around to learn about Outer Space, which I've already mentioned in this video, and I'll be talking about here in just a moment, because it was only like $20. Let's see, Jamie Wiley, a first-time poster, thanks for joining us, asked if multi-use cards are a mechanism or a component. And I think that's quite open to debate. In fact, when I talked about these back on episode 5, this was kind of one of the top 10 that I had done. And I was talking about then that I don't consider it to be a mechanism because I feel like games that use multi-use cards are using them as part of other systems. So it might be a worker placement game or maybe a deck building game, that uses multi-use cards as one of its systems. But it is listed as a mechanism in BGG, and I'm certainly not looking to make this any kind of an argument. So on that, Jamie went on the list Lagrange, Bloody Inn, and the Havens, which I'm assuming he meant Gloomhaven and Frosthaven. I do have to wonder if those are multi-use cards, because you're using that card as an action. It just sort of depends on either how you want to play it, maybe the top of one, the bottom of the other, if I remember, and I think you can also use them to sort of, stave off some damage. So I guess it's kind of multi-use again, not looking to make it an argument. I'm just kind of, when I think of multi-use cards, I think of a card that, and in fact, there's a great example, and it's called Food Truck Championship, which you've got these cards that then you can either use as ingredients, or I believe you can use them as recipes, or you can use them as customers to buy the food. it really, really leaned in hard to that multi-use card idea. It was unfortunately such a weird game that my wife and I played it once and just had no interest in ever going back to it. But that's what I think of when I think of a multi-use card game. I think of cards that have completely different options as to what you can do with them. You can, maybe spend them as a resource, or you can trash them to take an action, and I feel like with Gloomhaven and Frosthaven, it's a much narrower spread of options, right? Okay, well, I can play this to move, or I can play it to hit, but, it's still an action that I'm taking with my character on the board. Anyways, just my thoughts there on the multi-use cards. Greg Bowerly from the Meeple Society also mentioned multi-use cards. He brought that up in episode 5, and he mentioned Bruges and also Gloomhaven. So I'm already 2-1 on that one, which is totally fine. He also mentioned Dune Imperium and Lost Ruins of Arnak. It's been a long time since I played Dune Imperium, actually at the 2021 Dice Tower Retreat where we met. And I've played Lost Ruins of Arnak a few times, and I can definitely agree with that one there, because of course you can use the card for its ability, its action, maybe the resource that it gives you, or of course you can also spend them to just kind of help you be able to place the worker where you need the worker to go. So definitely a multi-use card. I just don't remember with Dune Imperium how the multi-use works there. And as I mentioned, I've talked about this in episode 5. So some of my favorite multi-use card games is Beer and Bread, Star Trek Frontiers, and I did mention Lorcana, which has a bunch of different ways to play its cards as well. Greg also mentioned pick up and deliver games, mainly Firefly, which I've still never gotten to play, and London Cabbie, which I have never heard of. And Greg and his lovely wife Katie are on their way here shortly in April, and we might have to check out Firefly. I've always been tempted by that game. The last Kickstarter from... what the heck's the name of that game? Gale Force 9 was really, really expensive, and I just had to stay away from it. So maybe we can check that out in April. Anyways, Dan Cheston 5786, a first-time poster, thanks for joining us, said he loves worker placement games, mentioned the Garfield games, at least a couple of which are worker placement, but said he also, his bread and butter is farming games, so a lot of Uwe Rosenberg titles would apply, and then closed by saying, "Excuse me while I go feed, crap, too late." I get it. I'm curious if you've played Hallertau by Uwe Rosenberg. That was, I think, probably the last game of his that I ever got. I really did enjoy it. I actually did a review out on this channel a long time ago. You can kind of see my first attempts at doing reviews. But I really do like that game. It's... I like the sort of upgrading system as you're trying to sort of upgrade your farm. The boulder system is kind of weird, but I get what he was trying to do there. But it is a really good game. I'd also highly recommend Dinogenics if you haven't heard of that one. I know that another Kickstarter of that one is coming out. They're going to be doing another reprint with a new expansion. A really great worker placement game. Also, Champions of Midgard is one that I really recommend here. And for me, that replaced Raiders from Garfield Games. They're very different games, but for me, that idea of Raiders, okay, well, I'm just placing a worker to pick up a worker so I can place worker to pick up a worker, felt to me very flat after a while. And so with Champions of Midgard, I'm placing workers to get more dice or to get more resources or to, sort of prepare to go on certain adventures. And then at the end of each round, after you've placed all your workers, you're using the dice as Vikings to go and fight these monsters. And it just felt so much more robust of a game to me than Raiders. And honestly, I think it kind of started me on the path of losing interest in a lot of the Garfield games. And they're not all worker placement. I did play Wayfarers, which I thought was pretty decent. They're all just very, very abstract, and they all look the same. But anyways, I know that they are very popular, and definitely some decent worker placement games in that lineup. Rentless666, another first-time poster, mentioned that he loves dice chuckers, and he mentioned Yahtzee, King of Tokyo, and Age of War, which I had to look up, and Desperados of Dicetown, which I have not heard of at all. I'm not a big fan of dice chuckers, and you might just, that might just be all I can say for this one. In fact, it is funny, I did mention Champions of Midgard. That is kind of a dice chucker, but you're only chucking dice, basically 8 times for the whole game. I would say that if I had to pick a favorite game with dice, it would probably be Tumbling Dice. which is, it's barely even a game. And I also love playing it the way that the Dice Tower plays it, where they just start adding in like D10s and D12s and D20s. And so you can have a score of 15 next to someone who has a score of like 312. And it's pure dumb luck, but it's just a funny game to play. And that would probably make my list as my favorite dice chucker. Definitely a very popular genre, though, for sure. So that's all I can add into that one. Mark from Australia said worker placement plus games. What he meant was a worker placement game that also adds other elements, and so he mentioned Raiders from Garfield, as well as Underwater Cities, which is a fantastic game, and I often forget that is sort of classified as a game with a worker placement system, because there is so much else going on in that game that you don't think of it as a worker placement plus. You only have, the 3 pawns you can put down, but that certainly doesn't discredit it as being a worker placement. So you're totally right, and I love that game. That is a fantastic game. I'm curious if you've ever played Everdell, which is also sort of a worker placement, engine building, tableau building type game. If you've ever played that, curious what you think of that one. And speaking of Everdell, my friend Chris Mutton, who I first played Everdell with for the first time when I met him over 4 years ago, said that he likes deck building games, and then mentioned 2 very terrible deck building games. Well, I didn't even write it down in here. It was Moonrakers and it was Dune Imperium. But I'm kidding. Kinda. I know that those are classified as deck building games, and I would call those, to use Mark's term, deck building plus games, right? They are deck building with other elements, I think, that make the more robust system. And I don't know what Dune Imperium would even be if I were to say that Dune was not a deck building game, what would I say that it is, except for, of course, a worker placement game, but also a worker placement game with just such randomness in what you can do, because, of course, you can't place a worker unless you have the cards that let you place a worker there, which is why I just hated it, because it doesn't have that mitigation of, say, Arnak. And then, of course, Moonrakers, yes, it's a deck building game, and I understand that they've improved the deck building with the second version of it, all the expansions, which I have over there, still never played. And I don't know that I want to play with you because you're so damn competitive. But I do need to check it out. I especially need to check out the Luminos, what's it called here? Because I actually have it on my desktop. Luminor. Luminor is the cooperative sort of app-driven version of the game, which I have on my computer. I got it off of Steam, and I've checked it out, but I haven't actually played it. And of course, that is like that negotiation game, which is, I think, why that game, I had a terrible first play of it, and I've just never recovered from it. I do love the look of it. I like the idea of it. I think I like it better as a 2-player game, which is not what it's supposed to be. And so I've been hesitant. I wonder if at some point I'm just going to end up getting rid of it, because I really just can't get it played. And it's not high on my list, Anyways, on that line, though, I also do love deck building and engine building games. I love a game that lets you, you start off, maybe you're all on the same footing, which is a very weak footing, and then throughout the game, you're just building up, and all of your actions become more powerful. You start to become asymmetrical with the other players. You get abilities that maybe they don't. You build a deck that maybe they don't. And I do really like games where those systems are also coupled with some efficiency play, and so they allow, if you're good, and I'm not saying that I am, but they allow you to possibly get to a scenario where you are just much more powerful than other players, because maybe you've played more cleanly, maybe you have seen the right path through those technologies that then let you, sort of level up faster than your opponents. Of course, I don't always love it when I'm the one who is just getting clobbered by you, Matt Ball. But I really do love these games. A couple examples, and there's a wide range of them, right? So Taverns of Tiefenthal is on my list. This is a deck building game with a dice element where you're using the dice to kick off various things, and it's a tough one. It doesn't always go your way because of those dice, but you're drafting the dice, so you've got some mitigation options there. Age of Atlantis, one of my absolute favorite games, is used as a tech tree to create that diversity, and also starts off with asymmetrical powers, asymmetrical abilities, buildings that you can build that other players can't. Love Age of Atlantis. Rocket Men, a Martin Wallace game, is a deck building game with a push your luck element as you're trying to launch these missions to outer space. There's the Imperium Legends Classics and Horizons game. These are deck builders, an abstract but heavy civilization deck building game. I've mentioned it before here in the Ratchet. And I really like this one because it has that, every faction is unique. Also reminds me a bit of Wormwood, actually, in that every faction is unique and you're trying to get cards out that kind of build up some combos to them. Although Wormwood is not what I would really call an engine. Well, it's kind of an engine building element. It's kind of a engine building, combo building type game. Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North. It's one of my favorite of these because, again, it's got asymmetrical abilities. Your decks are very different. You're trying to sort of build up, and eventually you get to where you just have a tableau covered with cards and you're firing off different things to get resources, then using those resources. A lot of efficiency play in Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North. One of my favorite games. Evacuation, also on the list. I mentioned this one. This one has the tech tree thing going for it, for sure. Voidfall on the list, and this is definitely one of those efficiency puzzle, but also the technologies that you're trying to research, and definitely a game where you can really break out from everyone else if you see the right path. And then Eclipse, Second Dawn for the Galaxy, one of my favorite games. Again with the technology, again with the efficient play, but also a bit more randomness in which systems you kind of explore as you're going. So those are just a couple of my favorite engine building, deck building, pool building. I could have easily included Life of the Amazonia on here, which is a bag builder. I also like Altiplano as a bag builder, although I think I like Amazonia a little bit more for its theme. So any of those games, you're just kind of leveling up, is my bread and butter for sure. Okay, so for question 4 next week, as I mentioned, this is episode 9, the final single-digit episode of the Weekly Ratchet, and I'm looking forward to episode 10 and hoping to get to episode 52 to have a full year, underneath my belt. So what I'm going to do for this one is I want to ask you, the audience, what you like about the Weekly Ratchet, what you would maybe like to see different about the Weekly Ratchet. I'm curious of the, 4 or so segments that I do, new games, crowdfunding games, games I've played, and of course, question of the week. What is your favorite? What is something else you'd like to see? I do want to try and get into maybe having some guests at some point. No idea how I'm going to crack that egg, but I do have some things coming up for sure. So tell me a little bit about what you think about the Weekly Ratchet, how you would like to maybe influence the direction of this show that I put on. Let me know in the comments. I am really curious to see what I get out of this. That is the question of the week for today, April 1st, 2024. Let's move on. Let me wrap up the show here with some games that I played this week. The first one I'm going to mention is Sausage. I can't say this without the lousy British accent from watching too much Clarkson's Farm and Grand Tour and Top Gear. But anyways, Sausage, as I mentioned, is by Joking Hazard. And this was sent to me by the Dice Tower, just kind of included into a box of stuff that they sent me. I mentioned it, I think, in the last episode. And it was funny because after I filmed the Ratchet last week, my family went to Center of the Universe, which is a brewery here in the outskirts of Ashland, Virginia. And I just packed along a couple games to play. And this is one that I grabbed. My wife and I just played this real quick. This game is I'm going to say crap. This game is pretty bad. You're building out these sausages. You're kind of building out a tableau. You're drafting, or you're just drawing cards from a deck, not really drafting. You're drawing cards from, you've got like heads of the sausage and you have the bodies of the sausage, and then you got like 90-degree bends, right? And so you're trying to make patterns of an order that's available. There might be 2 or 3 orders available if I remember. You're trying to build that exact shape and sort of pattern out of the heads and bodies. And then you're also trying to work towards there's one common goal. There's like 5 or 7 or so different cards, and you pick one of them for each game. And so on your turn, you're basically just drawing a sausage and playing it. Some of them may let you basically play again. And I had an instance where I basically got to do that 3 times in a row. So had a really, really huge turn, got like 2 orders fulfilled, made a ton of points, and the end game scoring is so weird. This rule book is really, really poorly written and detailed, and so we didn't really understand how to score it, but it was very evident from just what I had in front of me that I had way more points than my wife probably did, and we didn't even bother with the scoring. Just kind of like, okay, yeah, it's good enough. Packed it up, tossed it aside. Not a very good game. I also played Lorcana that night. My wife and daughter and I played Lorcana at the brewery. and I'll talk more about that here in maybe just a little bit. Then what I played, so Tuesday of last week, a friend came over and we played Kyperium, which I believe is how you say this. Dave Orse, actually, I mentioned him, I think, in episode 6 or 7. He wasn't able to join us for Voidfall a few weeks ago. He lives in Philadelphia area, but he works a lot of times here in town, so he linked up with me again and came over and we played Kyperium. This is a 2-player game. I mentioned this on one of the other previous episodes of the Ratchet. I mentioned it has one of the most gorgeous boxes I have ever seen, but that I was a little concerned with the way that the back of the box looked, that it just looks very kind of bland and boring, and I'm wrong, okay? I'm wrong. It is definitely abstract. I don't really feel the theme of this, in which you're supposed to be like building a station and but also racing to the place that you're building a station. So it's a little wonky. But anyways, it's a race to get to a certain spot on a sideboard, and to move your ships along that board, you are building tiles, building cards onto this display that you see here. I did not. There we go, that's better. You're laying cards on your half of the board, and each card that you play gives a worker placement spot for your opponent to use. So you're placing cards on your side of the board, but placing your workers on your opponent's side of the board. When you pull the workers off is when you actually trigger their actions, but the cards trigger when you play them. You have basically one main resource that you're collecting, which is Kyperium. There's little blue crystals, and then you're using that to take various actions. The biggest action is called the Jettison a Card action, in which you will take one of the cards off of your display, but then each card has colored corners. And for every corner, you're looking to see how many colors of other neighboring cards match the color of that corner. And for each matching color, you get a synergy, and then you move on that track based on your total synergy value. There's other ways to move that track as well, and again, you're just kind of racing to get to that finished spot, but there's a couple of spots along that track that will give you access to a strategy card. You have these 3 strategy cards at the beginning of the game, and when you land on that strategy card spot, you then pick which one of those 3 cards you're going to have access to for the game, and you can play it at the beginning of any of your future turns to trigger its one-time ability, and they're usually pretty decent. I really enjoyed this. My first play of this with Dave was really good. He beat me by 1 turn. There's an engine building element to this as well, because as you jettison various cards, each card has a core color, and you're flipping over these tiles on your player board, and once you have jettisoned a card, let's say a teal card, you then flip over the teal tile, and then it gives you a bonus every time you play another teal card. And so again, that kind of just a little bit of an engine building element to it. And the game really starts to speed up, and we had a lot of fun with this. In fact, Dave went and bought his copy very shortly after, already has it, and I think we may have already gotten a play in of it. And then 2 days later, I think I played this again. I played it with my wife, taught her the game, because I really wanted to just test out some other systems of it and kind of dig into it a little more. Again, had a very fun game of this. Not my wife's kind of a theme, if I'm totally honest, but she was definitely... The first couple turns, she was like, I'm just lost. I have no idea what I'm doing. And again, I beat her by just a couple turns, but she was only 1 space behind me on the track. So still a very tight game, and a very tense game. And it is a little take that. You've got options to destroy each other's Kyperium. You can maybe move your opponent's cards. Rarely can you remove completely an opponent's card. You can also put some cards in your opponent's area that just gives them like black corners, so there's no color synergy that you can make. There's a lot going on. It's take that, but it's not super mean, because of course if you spend a lot of time trying to thwart your opponent, you're not getting anything done yourself. So you really have to be mindful of whether you're pulling or whether you're racing towards the finish. Anyways, really neat game. I'm going to be checking this out some more. The rulebook's not great. There's that whole strategy card thing that I mentioned is not explained well in here. I had to ask some questions out on Board Game Geek. Got some clarity. I need to ask some more questions, because there's a couple things that are just not really covered by the rulebook. And that's the one thing holding the game back. It's also missing a little symbology. Some of the actions on the board that you're taking, there's a couple actions built into the board, and they're not well explained on the board. There's costs to some of those actions that are not shown on that space. You can forget about them, and that really changes the dynamic of the game. but still a pretty good game. Kyperium. This is by Matt Closeout and Steve Castle. More on that to come soon. Then we played Outer Space. So we went back to Center of the Universe over the weekend, and we played this Outer Space game, and I had a blast with this game. This is I said this was $20. This is only $13. It says it right there. This is a card laying, sort of a tile laying game. You've got these square cards. You get these, it has 5 or 6 scoring cards. You pick 3 of them for every game. And then you're just playing these square cards. You have a hand of 3. You pick 1 card to play on your turn, and you can overlay cards in any way. So you can overlap a card completely, just 1 or 2 of the quadrants of each card, however you want to play it. And then depending on the scoring cards, you'll score points immediately based on if you made new connections between the constellations of the stars, and then you're building paths between the stars to get points. There's also these nebula colors, which may score based on your starting setup for the game. And you have these black holes. And if you stack the black holes up, you'll get more and more points. But when you place the 3rd black hole in a stack of any cards underneath it, it turns into a mega black hole, and you flip the card upside down, and then nothing else can get played on that because, of course, it's a super black hole, which I thought was super cool. I had a blast playing this, actually. Really had a lot of fun. It's a very, very fast game. It says it is an hour or 30 minutes. It says it's a 30-minute game. I think we had it done in 20. Daughter didn't love it so much. She was a little grumpy that day, but my wife and I really enjoyed this. Outer Space, the galaxy building card game, $13 at Barnes & Noble. Then, let me see, we also played no, that was it, right? No, geez, that's what I'm missing. Again, Lorcana. We played Lacuna at Center of the Universe. I'm actually going to pop this open real quick because I want to show you how this works. So you have this really pretty cloth mat. Very nice, very pretty. All right, and you lay this out on the table, and then you pop out a ruler, you pop out a rule book, you pop out this bag of metal tokens, and there's a bag of spare pieces, and then you're left with, this is going to be murder on the microphone, I apologize, you lay out these flowers. That's good enough. Then it's a 2-player game, and each player gets a set of gold and a set of silver little pawns. And then on your turn, all you do is you place your pawn in a line between 2 flowers of the same color. And you can place it anywhere on that imaginary line, and then you take both of those flowers. You only have 6 pawns, so each player will do this 6 times, placing a piece out and then taking the 2 colors. And then once all your pawns are out, then you go back around the mat here, and you look at each flower, and you say, okay, well, this flower is definitely closer to the silver pawn, so the silver player gets that one. These are definitely closer to the gold player, so the gold player gets those, and so on and so forth until the board is empty with just the metal pawns left behind. And then you simply see, of the 7 colors in the game, who has the most of each color. So if you have at least 4 of a flower, then you have the majority, and whoever has the majority, the most color majorities wins the game. The thing probably plays in 8 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. We rapid fired 3 plays of this. My wife and I played. My daughter, who like I said was grumpy that day, saw it and immediately wanted to play it. Played with my wife and won. Then played with me and won again. And her mood changed a little bit after that. Just a delightfully cute little game. Had a lot of fun with this one. Definitely a nice pub game. A little bit of a large footprint. You can kind of see how large this mat is. But yeah, this game is a delight. Like I said, Shut Up and Sit Down reviewed this on their channel a while ago and just made it sound absolutely spectacular. This was a really bad idea, by the way, setting all this up. And now I gotta try and talk improv style while I'm putting all this away. Not really sure what I was thinking. There's also a piece on the floor I'm gonna have to get later. And we're just gonna kind of speed this up and wipe. Okay, yeah. Bad choices were made here. Okay, so that was Lacuna. Great game. Also, over the weekend, I played Isle of Skye. I have this game on sort of lend from a friend of mine, Mike Gallo. Thank you very much for lending me this game. I've mentioned this one in the past, I think also in episode 5. I talked about Alexander Pfister games and how I am just not a big Pfister fan. And Mike and my friend Daniel introduced me to this as kind of a challenge to see if we could find a game, an Alexander Pfister game that Jeff actually likes. And I did like it. This is a neat game. It is sort of Carcassonne adjacent, sort of the conversations we've had about Carcassonne, but it is with this added element in that you're sort of auctioning off the tiles. You get 3 tiles at the beginning of each round. You choose one that's just going to go away immediately, and then you set prices on the other 2. If an opponent buys one of them from you, you get your money back. So you're actually setting the price by putting your money on that tile. If they buy it from you, you take the money back, and then you also get their money. They get the tile. But if no one buys your tiles, then you have to spend that money, and you have to take that tile, and then you're adding them Carcassonne style to your tableau. This is the original box, but Mike has all the expansions stuffed into this game. So we played the Journeyman and the Druids expansion. He also has, I think, the Tunnels in here, but there wasn't a rule sheet, so I'm sure that we played those wrong. And I wanted to try that all out because I heard that it was a decent 2-player game with those expansions added in. And it definitely adds a lot to the game. I mean, this was a good 90-minute game for what was originally a 60-minute game. The Journeyman gives a little pawn that you're kind of moving around this tableau. You actually are sort of exploring your own area that you're building, and you're trying to sort of see certain objectives to then move up these tracks, which will give you extra income, extra points, increasing the movement of that person. There's a lot of stuff that kind of happens on that track. The Druids expansion adds an extra market, so you actually get to make 2 purchases on your turn, purchasing 1 tile from your opponent, purchasing at least a tile from the Druids board, and then of course possibly getting any of the tiles of your own that your opponent or opponents didn't buy. I did like this. I enjoyed it with all the stuff in it, although it did get a bit thinky. It could get a little AP at times, and there's a lot of simultaneous play where you're just kind of like doing your own thing, setting up your tableau, sort of choosing where you're going to move your Journeyman, and it just kind of felt a little aloof, if you will. And it's still one of those just super dry Alexander Pfister games. This is not there's no engine building really in here. There's no progression really through the game. I enjoyed it, but at the end of it, I asked my wife, well, what'd you think? And she kind of went, eh. which is wife speak for, I don't care if I never play this again. But and so I liked it, and if I were to go buy a Pfister game, I would buy this one, but I just don't think it's going to get played enough to warrant the cost. There is a big box edition, but it doesn't include the Journeyman expansion, so you have to buy both, which is then like $80-something, and I just don't think that's worth it. But a good game. I do like it. Isle of Skye. I played Lorcana again last night with my family, and I won't talk too long about this. I really do like Lorcana, although it is it's a very basic, sort of simple game. We've been playing to 25 points instead of the base 20 points. I think I might even try going to 30, because I just feel like there's so much of this game that doesn't really get discovered because it ends too quickly. I did throw together a quick purple-blue deck. The purple deck is a deck that lets you do a lot of extra card drawing, and the blue deck is supposed to be a ramp deck, which I had to look up, but that means that it's easier to get the ink, which is your sort of equivalent to mana for the Magic the Gathering folks amongst us, and you use that ink to then get other cards played. So I have one deck that lets me get extra cards into my hand, and another deck that helps me hurry up and get those cards to the board. Didn't really fire off like I'd expected. I actually ended up with a ton of characters in front of me, which is unusual, really. Maybe that means the system worked, but I didn't really have any more ink than anyone else. I just had a lot cheaper characters, so I was able to play a bunch of 2s and 3s. And I think the blue deck 2s and 3 ink characters are pretty strong. I had a Caterpillar card, which was like maybe a 3 ink, but it gave me 3 lore when it would quest. And so my last turn of that game, I jumped 10 points and won the game, actually shooting up to 28 very quickly. But fun game. And that's really about it. That is actually the end of this episode. I'm hoping I've kept the time down. I need to hurry up and go and edit this because I'm going to be playing Wormwood online with the designers of the game again. I'm really looking forward to that. I don't have my copy anymore. I had to send it on to the next reviewer, which I was a little bummed by. But I'll be chatting about that briefly at least next week. And my preview video will be coming up here on the channel fairly soon. That is a really good video. I'm very proud of it. Can't wait to share it with the audience here on the channel. That's it for the Weekly Ratchet. Thank you so much for tuning in. Next episode, number 10. Let me know your comments, what you think of the direction of the show, how you think things are going. I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback. That is it. I'm shutting up. We'll catch you next week. Cheers.